Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first museum management training together with the Commission on Higher Education and the University of the Philippines, Baguio through the Museo Kordilyera. So we will start the opening remarks from Dr. Prospero de Vera, Chair of the Commission on Higher Education.
To UP Baguio Chancellor R.R. Villos, the representatives of the state universities and colleges who are part of this webinar, representatives of partners like local government units and everybody in attendance, good afternoon to all of you. This webinar or this training program actually was scheduled, if I'm not mistaken, or planned last year, or at least before COVID. So this has been long in waiting, and I hope that as this has started, it will all go fast forward from now on. Let me just tell everyone how this whole webinar workshop started. I think 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, Chancellor RR, I had the pleasure of visiting UP Baguio and looking at the improvements done under the administration of Chancellor Villos, who is one of the very few chancellors in the history of UP who was given a third term for his exemplary and outstanding work as Chancellor. And so in that occasion, I remember it was raining very hard when I went there. I looked at the new initiatives of UP Baguio, and I was introduced to the Museo Kordilyera. I was amazed by how well designed the museum was, how the display was organized, and how good it was to feel walking around the museum as a knowledge center for the Cordilleras. And so I asked Chancellor Villos, how did you put this together? And so we got on to the discussion about curating, conceptualizing, designing, etc. And so I told him point blank during that meeting, how fast can you put together a training program funded by the Commission so that all the state universities and colleges who have their own museum can also learn from your experience in setting up the Museo Kordilyera. I have been to the different state universities. I think our presidents and our school officials know that I have been going through all the state universities and colleges as part of my learning process. I still expect and I still plan to be the first chair that will visit all the 112 state universities and colleges. I have been to some of the subs and I have seen their museum. And they're of different levels of development, different designs, content, etc. And this is an opportunity for the state universities and colleges to work together under the guidance of the technical expertise of UP Baguio to start improving our museums as powerhouse or repository of learning resources. This is the philosophy behind this project. And I know it took a little long for the project to be approved and the funding to be released, but now we are here to start this. Universities and museums are complementary in educational enhancement, conservation, and preservation of indigenous knowledge systems. And more important, the active production of knowledge. We have not seen universities in the Philippines take on this very valuable role. But if you look at universities in other countries, one of the most important parts of the university is their exhibits on the history of the university and the role they have played in changing the direction of the nation and changing the lives of people. So there is untapped potential of university museums in the country, not just as a repository and not just as a knowledge center of the history of the university, but more important, as a facility to stimulate local tourism and become a source for creative nourishment. I have also told everyone in my lectures on tourism that it is surprising that in the Philippines, universities are not seen automatically as tourist areas. If you go to North America, for example, you go to New York, your trip is never complete until you go to the premier universities of New York, like Columbia University. The same if you go to Yale. If you go to London, a trip to the London School of Economics is a requirement because universities are tourist areas. But in the Philippines, our universities, or many of our universities, have not realized their potential as tourist areas. And hopefully, through this project of improving the museums and the collection of state universities and colleges, our state universities can now take on the bigger task of transforming their campuses to become logical places to visit for foreigners. That is because our universities in this country have a long history. Many of them were established, not only decades, but even more than a century ago. And many of them have played an integral part in the history of local communities. And we must highlight that. And the starting point is universities that have good museums. Therefore, this project, Museum Management Training for Higher Education Institutions, transforming university museums as sites for cultural education and creative tourism, is being funded by CHED through the UP Baguio facility, so that we start creating a network of state universities similarly minded and similarly committed to developing their museums as the starting point and the anchor of transforming their universities into tourist destinations. We hope to this project that we can maximize university museums as platforms in higher learning, and more importantly, as the anchor in developing our universities to be mandatory places that every tourist will go to when they go to their area. I know COVID has created difficulties in the design of this training program, But I also know that soon enough, we will be able to manage COVID. And I hope that as you do these introductory webinars and as you move on, you will be able to design a more intensive capacity building program so that the universities as part of this project can start working together to improve the university museums in other parts of the country. I hope that this will be part of your design, that you will test the knowledge that you will learn by doing a hands-on improvement of the collections that are existing in the various state universities and colleges. This network that you are creating is a network that is important because it is a network that connects, makes viable, and celebrates the potentials of universities. It is also a network that will connect the universities to their immediate community, a network that will connect the universities to indigenous communities, a network that will connect you to local artisans, to local businesses, and to the life of the communities around you. I know that you are all dedicated to this effort. I know that you are not only anxious and anticipating a good training program under the leadership of Chancellor Villos. You are in good hands, but more important, I hope to see you later on as the training continues to be redesigning the museums of the different state universities and colleges. I hope I will be there to cut the ribbon to the improved museums of all the other state universities in this country. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak, and welcome to this webinar.
Naimbag na aldaw da kayo amin to our partners in education tourism, the Department of Tourism, the state universities and colleges, higher education institutions, the local government units, and everyone, the stakeholders in higher education institution. Welcome to the Museum Management Training for Higher Education Institution, Transforming University Museums, a site for cultural education and as destination for creative tourism. Our heartfelt thanks goes to the University of the Philippines, Baguio, Museo Kordilyera, to your hard work in putting together this series of university museum management training. It will actually also start that excitement in what we call education tourism. Education tourism is one of the projects of the CHED International Affairs staff to put into focus our higher education institution as a global education hub in areas or in programs that are considered niche or programs of strength in the Philippines, culture and heritage being one of them. Your enthusiasm, which I believe with an application about almost 500 interested participants, shows that desire to start working on what we have as a nation, our culture and our heritage. we are also very excited with the project Education Tourism because initially when it started, it was really a study in the Philippines effort, positioning the Philippines, as I said, as an ASEAN destination, preferred destination for students. But now it has evolved, and we can really see through your cooperation, through the excitement in the project, that we can in fact grow all our efforts, no, from the university to the community to the higher education stakeholders to local and national development towards the attainment of the sustainable development goals. There will be more activities lined up for everyone. We will be expanding also the grantees under the education tourism, but there will be more work and more responsibility for all of you who were given this opportunity to train and start building your respective university museums. Again, maraming salamat, Chancellor Rovilius, Professor Ikin, sa lahat ng mga tumulong, nagpunyagi para maitayo itong programa na ito. Kapit lang, malayo pa ang ating pupuntahan, but I assure you it's going to be a very exciting journey for all of us. Let us start building, localizing the SDGs through building our culture and heritage, and this is going to be our narrative to the world. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat.
Good morning, everyone, and we welcome you to the Museum Management Training. We have over 600 participants from all over the Philippines, simultaneously on live streaming on Zoom and YouTube. And we have also some students and faculty who are online via our UPV-LE, or the virtual learning platform of the University of the Philippines. I am Professor Ikin Salvador Amores. I am the director of the Museo Kordilyera and the overall project coordinator of the MK-CHED project on museum training. On behalf of our project team, we welcome you to this exciting event. This project is in collaboration with the Commission on Higher Education and the University of the Philippines, Baguio, through the Museo Kordilyera. The online training will run from today, October 14, until November 28, 2020. The sessions are twice a week on Wednesdays and Thursdays from 10 in the morning to 12 noon. The presentations will be recorded and can be archived and accessed via YouTube and our museum website later on. First, I would like to start with the project goals and rationale of the training. So we aim to provide trainings and technical assistance to HEIs who are planning to set up their museums. At the same time, to reinvigorate museums to be platforms for supplemental and/or alternative learning system. Because we have now the iPad or Indigenous People's Education programs, and I think the museums will play a vital role in this particular aspect, and as well as for tourism. We also would like to incorporate materials from international partners and to show examples of alternative or virtual museum experience. We also would like to use blended modality, both online and face-to-face training through this platform. In the museum management training for HEIs, we aim to have capacity building, internationalization, and impact. In the capacity building, we aim to deepen understanding of the educational role of museums in higher educational institutions, acquire advanced skills in museology, museum work, and transfer of skills in museology to higher educational institutions, and to enhance the capacity, appreciation, and support for institutions who employ museums for quality education and innovative pedagogy.
In internationalization, we aim to develop partnerships with international and local museums to exchange and source out materials, particularly on alternative learning modules for museum exhibitions and activities. We aim to steer greater awareness and appreciation, as well as instill pride in one's cultural heritage and identity through museum exhibitions and services, and to contribute to conservation of regional and national culture and heritage, which are important anchors for sustainable growth in the country. And lastly, the impact, we aim to mainstream museum-based learning in higher educational institutions, academic, extension, and production programs. Increase capacity of staff to support training needs, collaboration with higher educational institutions, and at the end of the training, we hope to come up with a directory of HEIs all over the Philippines, or HEI museums all over the Philippines. Collaboration with international museums, advocates of iPad using museums as platform for higher learning.
We base from our training needs assessment survey, so about 69% said that they have an existing museum or an existing building that needs improvement. And at the same time, about 15% are planning to set up their museum. And then 15% are conceptualizing their museum. So in the training needs assessment, we also found out that there are indeed in dire need of this kind of training for the museums, such as the management of museums, handling of artifacts, research and exhibition of artifacts, among others. As a university museum, we highlight the value of research before setting out an exhibition, as this would be the basis of the narrative of the story. In addition, the analysis of the project team based on this survey allowed us to design the training and learning modules to meet the needs of our participants. Since last year, we already convened 15 panelists who are museum practitioners, conservators, and scholars in the field who have an extensive experience on museum work. So the presentations will be shown on scheduled dates starting today until November 27. I also would like to discuss the online training comes in different stages. Level 1 will be on basic museology. Here we give an overview of museum work and how we can assist HEIs to jumpstart their museum work. The Level 1 training will take place today until November 27. Level 2 will be Advanced Museology, which will delve deeper into detailed work on the museums, which will take place on February 2021 in time for the Arts Month. Level 3 will be the Technical Assistance Program, where selected HEI museums will be assisted by museum experts. There will also be on-site visits and brainstorming on how to improve their museums. The final output will be a curated museum, an application of the knowledge learned from level 1 and 2. The project will also provide museum supplies that can be useful for this particular endeavor. Level 3 will take place during the summer months. Hopefully, when travel restrictions will be lifted, we can travel. And if not, we can do everything online. In each of the levels, activities and exercises will be sent to the participants for completion, which they can work on with their respective museum team. All this will be assessed by our museum experts. If you finish trainings per day, you will be given a certificate of attendance, and the link will be shared to you later on. But participants who completed level 1 and 2 will be issued a certificate of completion and goes to the second round of the museum training for next year, which will be a training that is highly advanced. Hopefully, all lessons learned will cascade to their respective museums and respective universities once they are done with the training.
And lastly, if you have other concerns and queries, please feel free to email us Send us a note on our FB page or call us. On behalf of our chairperson from the Commission on Higher Education, Dr. Popoy de Vera, our Chancellor, Raimundo Revillos, and our project team, along with Dean Toto Colongon of the College of Social Sciences, our museum staff, our IT staff, we welcome you to the online museum trainings for HEIs. We will start the webinar shortly, and you can send in your questions for the webinar talk on Zoom and on YouTube. Many thanks, and looking forward to a productive 2 months for all of us.
good morning. We now proceed to the first speaker or resource person for our webinar series, who will talk about museums as tourist destinations. I would like to introduce Ms. Mary Venus Q. Tan. She served in various capacities in the Department of Tourism and its attached agencies for more than 30 years, to include her designation as tourism attaché for the Western, Central, and Eastern Europe at the Department of Trade and Industries headquarters in Frankfurt, Germany. She's been there for 15 years. And as the tourism ambassador in Europe, she has initiated many projects and innovative programs in marketing and promotions. She's also instrumental in the appreciation and interest and unprecedented increase in the demand of visitor arrivals from Europe and Russia to the Philippines. Among her notable contributions she had initiated is the modification of travel advisories of the Philippines from countries in Europe, opening of tourism and travel from Russia, the accelerated demand for special interest in leisure activities with the pioneering Dive Philippines campaign starting in Europe, which eventually took attraction in the major global tourism markets. This among many other initiatives which remains unparalleled until today. Upon returning back in 2015, Ms. Tan was appointed as Regional Director of DOT in the Cordillera, with concurring designation as National Coordinator for the International Marketing and Promotions for Northern Luzon and Palawan, a position that she held for 3 years. In her capacity as Regional Director and National Coordinator for Marketing and Promotion for Northern Luzon and Palawan, she spearheaded several urban rehabilitation tourism initiatives, including her brainchild campaign, Rev Up, Revive, Revisit, Revitalize, or Rev Bloom. The project on the Stobosa Hillside Artwork, Project Purao or White Roof Painting, and the Village Innovation Community Enhancement Projects in Baguio, and the rest of the Cordilleras and Palawan. She's known for her genuine dedication to the cause of sustainable tourism, as attested by her affiliation with notable local and international organizations dedicated to social civic causes. COO Tan is a current founding chair of the non-governmental organization Inspirational Women of the Cordilleras, or IWOC, whose members are lady spouses of elected officials in the region, and whose programs are underpinned towards nature-based projects and inclusive community-based civic empowerment. In international relations, as DOT Regional Director, Ms. Tan is the steering committee member of the UNFA hosted Mountain Partnership. She was designated as chair of the government sector for Asia and the Pacific. She is also credited widely for being instrumental in initiating the application and eventual designation of Baguio City as a member of the all-exclusive UNESCO Creative Cities Network in 2017, under the Crafts and Folk Arts category. Baguio City then earned its badge as the very first city to be designated in the Philippines to the prestigious network membership. To our participants and guests, we welcome Ms. Mary Venus Q. Tan, who will talk about museums as tourist destinations.
Good morning. My name is Marie Venus Tan. I was the former Tourism Promotions Board Chief Operating Officer of the Department of Tourism. On the occasion of the Museums Month, I thank the University of the Philippines, Baguio, together with the Commission on Higher Education, for this honor and opportunity to discuss and strengthen the ties of the tourism sector with that of the museum sector, and an avenue to galvanize areas of collaboration in advancing sustainable tourism development. My topic today is tourism as a destination for museums. Cultural heritage tourism. This is a resurging theme. Tourism, like all dynamic sectors of the country's economy, is continually evolving. Today, we witness a shift in tourism paradigm from one that is focused on the tangible aspects of destinations to one that is focused on the intangible, the people, their culture and heritage, their way of life. Indeed, there is a resurgence of interest in culture and heritage as key components of the tourism value chain. In most parts of the world, tourists are drawn by an inexplicable interest to know more about the culture of a people or a community and to draw experience and inspiration from it. This is a new paradigm that has provided focus on the people rather than the inanimate aspects of destinations. We see a shift from tangible to intangible heritage and more attention for indigenous and other minority groups. To cite an example, in the Cordilleras, where I once worked as regional director of the Department of Tourism, the rice terraces of the Philippine Cordilleras, popularly known as Ifugao rice terraces, is a tourism product in itself, being a UNESCO inscribed World Heritage Site. The terraces are a sight to behold, especially during planting season, where the terraced mountains turn into verdant green, which turn into gold come harvest season. Then, and now, the terraces draw thousands of tourists every year as an ecotourism destination. Today, the Ifugao rice terraces is being visited by tourists not only because of its physical attraction, but also because of the growing interest on the culture of the Ifugao, the same people who told to make these mountains an agricultural wonder. It is now common to see foreign or local tourists as homestay accommodations along the foot of the Batad rice terraces. For instance, where they immerse on the way of life of the Ifugaos and experience pounding of rice the traditional way, or learn the Ifugao chant, songs, and dances, or even learn to collect snails and eat them too. In other words, focus has now shifted from the art to the artists. This experiential tourism journey is happening not only in the Cordilleras, but also in most key destinations in the country, where there is a pronounced indigenous culture that can be offered as a key tourism product. We are now therefore seeing the rise of cultural tourism, which relates to many ways of life, creativity, and everyday culture. In other words, to people. This cultural tourism can be described in a few words as the form of tourism where culture is the basis in either attracting tourists, the motivation for people to travel, or the resources experienced or consumed. What is the role of museums as cultural instruments? This resurging interest in culture and heritage is itself the driver for the growing public interest on museums. Once considered as elitist, conservative, cold, boring, or even irrelevant, my apologies for the language, museums today are getting the attention that they so richly deserve from the different strata of society. For the tourism sector, this is a great opportunity for not only gives justice to the actual role that museums should play, but also elevates museum to a level that it actually becomes a part of tourism. For us, this is the part which makes museums alive and meaningful. The valuable role of museums was summarized by Mark Lilla, a noted political scientist and historian of ideas. He said that museum is an empowering institution meant to incorporate all who would become part of a shared cultural experience. Any citizen can walk into a museum and appreciate the highest achievements of his culture. If he or she spends enough time, he or she may be transformed. As a lover of culture and museums, I fully agree with Lila's insightful definition of museums. Museums are not only a collection of artifacts or places where unwanted objects or materials are deposited, but they are a mirror of humanity. The museum as an institution tells the story of man the world over and how humanity has survived in its environment over the years. It houses things created by nature and by man, and in our modern society, it houses the cultural soul of the nation. Museums, therefore, are conduits of cultural relevance. In revisiting Philippine museums, I believe that it is now the opportune time to revisit the role of museums in the Philippines and to examine how museums could be linked with our mutual objective for responsible, inclusive, sustainable, and equitable tourism, or RISE. What is the state of museum in the Philippines today? According to the Philippine Association of Museums Incorporated, Philippine museums have evolved in number, in structure, and in quality of programs and services. In 2015, there are 172 notable museums in the country. The National Capital Region has 56 museums. Northern Luzon has at least 22. Southern Luzon has 36 museums. Visayas has 36 museums. Mindanao has 11. And Central Luzon has 11 notable museums. Organizational structure has not been confined to administrative and curatorial office, but has branched out to education, marketing, public relations, development, extension programs, museum shops, and restaurants. Traditional programs of collections management, in-house exhibitions, research, and publications have expanded to seminars, concerts, children's activities, apprenticeships, training, films, and technical exchanges. The latest development in Philippine museum is the emergence of interactive museums and eco-museums such as the Science Centrum, which was established in 1992, and Museo Pambata in 1993, which allows the audience to interact with exhibition components to heighten their enjoyment and facilitate their learning process. The development of Philippine Museum in the past 98 years has been from tradition to innovation. In recent years, museums have become cultural animators and social reformers. Throughout Philippine museum history, conditions of government support for the arts, freedom of artistic expression, and private patronage of the arts provided conducive environment for the museum's growth and transformations. I talk about absence of museum culture. While there is an observed resurgence of interest of Filipinos about museum in recent years, this is not becoming more pronounced compared to the level existing in other countries. The truth is, Filipinos are not yet museum-going public. While museum-going is considered a lifestyle in other countries, this is not yet inherent in the Filipinos' way of life. Clearly, something should be done to arouse a museum culture among Filipinos, especially that museums are expected to play a vital role in the appreciation of culture at the very least, and for socio-cultural transformation at the most. With this reality, it is our belief in the tourism sector that the role of museums will be enhanced when they are made as a part of the tourism value chain. This is a win-win strategy that will benefit both sectors. Tourism and museums. What is the vital link? The existing relationship between museums and tourism, especially cultural and heritage tourism, can be best described as complementary, where the development of one sector could bring benefits to the other sector, and vice versa. It is no doubt a working relationship, and the possibilities for a fruitful cooperation seem to be almost endless. One glaring similarity between museums and tourism is their role as unique storytellers of the history, culture, and contemporary life of societies. As I have mentioned earlier, the museums as an institution tells about the story of humanity and its survival. Like museums, tourism is also narratives or stories. When one tourist visits a certain destination or encounter a group of people in the community, they are seeking for stories or narratives. This is the way tourists connect with the world, give life meaning, and seek memorable experiences. For many tourists, museums are the first places to go because in a short visit, they can get a good glimpse of the culture and history of a certain place. Museums could thus be a good starting point in educating and showcasing tourists what the Philippines has to offer. People will better appreciate the totality of a certain tourism destination in the country if they are provided with knowledge about the culture and history of the place. Yet, for many years, museums were undermined by the tourism industry. However, the trend is now reversing, and today, museums are attracting a large number of people. They are one of the favorite choices in the world of travel and leisure. There is even a growth of museum tourism, which is fueled by an interest by tourists to explore the culture of a particular place through museums. Cultural heritage tourism have certainly made a comeback, and museums are now playing a major role within tourism and leisure. Some schools of thought even surmise that the main role of museums should be to attract more tourists aside from protecting cultural heritage. Given this, museums cannot afford to just wait and expect that people will start queuing up. They have to take on a more proactive role to attract more audiences. The audiences or clients of museums also have a strong link to tourism because more often than not, a big chunk of visitors of museums are indeed tourists. In fact, it can be argued that all tourism activities contain some element of culture, which almost always includes a visit to a museum. While a museum and cultural tourism could have certain differences given their nonprofit and profit characters, and given that the two are different disciplines, there are many aspects common and are sometimes overlapping for both sectors. There are various fundamental interests they share. Both museum and tourism contribute to society, for instance, by providing and promoting experiences, education, recreation, and by developing cross-cultural understanding. Audience perspective is also a consideration for both sectors. The responsible use of the country's cultural heritage is vital for tourism. The conservation and responsible use of cultural heritage is one of museums' fundamental duties. Both sectors are also very much concerned with sustainable development, wherein the main goal is to ensure quality of life, not only for present time, but also for the future. And so, in a nutshell, the resource a cultural museum and cultural tourism share is the so-called cultural heritage, which consists of features belonging to the culture of a particular society, which still exist from the past and which have a historical importance. In advancing museum development in the country, what can we do? The national government has in fact issued an important policy guidelines to advance the development of museums in the country. highlighted by Republic Act 11333, or the law strengthening the National Museum of the Philippines, delegating it as the country's primary institution for the management and development of museums and collections of national scope or significance in the areas of arts, culture, heritage, and natural history. In terms of capacitating the local government units, the seal of good governance being conferred by DILG to deserving LGUs has included in the 2019 selection criteria the promotion of tourism, culture, and the arts. Hopefully, this will encourage LGUs to put up more museums in their respective areas of influence. It is thus obvious that the present government attaches great importance to the protection and utilization of cultural heritage and makes the development of the museum sector part of the national strategy. But there is more than needs to be done, especially on the initiative to make museums as integral part of tourism. What are the possibilities for increased cooperation in a good partnership between museum and tourism? And in what areas? You all are experts on the field and are in best position to answer this. As a tourism practitioner myself, there are a few salient points which I believe deserve our utmost attention. One of the biggest challenges that we have to face is on how to develop a museum culture among Filipinos. This is a thing that could not be done overnight, because to change mindsets will take years or decades or even generations. But the most important thing that we can do is to lay the foundations to make museums as part of the mindset of every Filipino. Developing a deep museum culture among Filipinos could entail a lot of creativity, and it starts with arousing the interest of the Filipinos as a museum-going public. To do this, focus should be on visitor service more than collections care. We should create an image for museums more like a workshop whose function is to provide appealing and memorable museum experiences. The aim is to strengthen the relationship with the public, to serve better the general public, and by that, increase the museum's touristic value. In pursuit to develop a strong and colorful museum culture in the Philippines, education and educational institutions will play a vital role in terms of instilling among the youth the value of appreciating and preserving cultural heritage. Government agencies such as DepEd and CHED should encourage educational institutions to integrate non-formal education spaces and institutions such as museums among educational platforms wherein students could adopt unique learning experiences. Museum education should be institutionalized, and non-formal education activities should constitute an important complement to formal education. To instill better appreciation about museums, schools could even declare a Cultural Heritage Day or Museum Day, which promotes awareness of cultural heritage. Museums should also improve relationships and form stronger partnerships with municipalities, tourism associations, and other stakeholders to expand their visitors. The key word here is synergy. Museum and tourism will prosper only if they complement the efforts of the host LGUs as well as other tourism stakeholders. The visitor experience would be very much enhanced if the interplay of government, museum, private stakeholders could be maximized. So more than ever, the cooperation between museums in the Philippines and those of other countries should grow by leaps and bounds. Building international partnerships is necessary to attract more audiences and also to promote the country's tourism brand. Exchange exhibitions could be done frequently, and cooperation agreements between governments and collaborations with museums or museum institutes or other countries should be intensified. The Filipino culture should go global through museums. Museums also identify the technologies available to develop a content-driven approach in museums' marketing strategy. True, museums are still adopting to the new forms of marketing and outreach. The government should encourage technical innovation of museums to turn technological achievements into practical use. Let me cite an example of good technical marketing innovation for museums. In Finland, for instance, they have the Finnish Museum Card, which offer an entrance to over 250 museums in this country. The card is valid for 1 year and allows entrance to both big and small museums, regional museum centers, and local museums. The museum card was launched in 2015, and over 100,000 cards have already been purchased. On average, a single card is used 10 times a year. The government should really strengthen legal protection overall, planning as well as micromanagement, to provide full support to the museum sector. It would be desirable to have protection laws for cultural relics, as well as regulation laws on museums, as well as cultural facilities. An inventory system for cultural heritage should be in place, and we should have consensus on cultural relics, both movable and immovable. We should also encourage museums to improve their management through innovation in collection and display, and hosting exhibition and education activities of various types and themes. So when it comes to innovation, people see museums as boring, might still get interested in activities museums could offer. Partnering up with cooks or even baristas to teach people about gastronomy, cuisine, coffee, wine, or so on might be of interest. Activities like lectures and guided tours could also be appealing. Furthermore, activities like workshops, like we have, can encourage whole families or school classes to visit. So finally, the vital relationship between museum and tourism should be made clear and understandable to both sectors. Tourism must develop an awareness of museum concepts and practices, while museums have to seek to understand tourism and how it functions. Really, effective communication is the key. So in concluding, considering the trends happening in tourism, it is very likely that the museum's role vis-a-vis tourism will become more and more relevant and important. This is a vital consideration when planning for the development of both sectors. As can be observed, the role of museums has changed over time. Aside from their traditional role of collecting, preserving, and sharing rich collections, museums now find that they play an increasing role in supporting the development of communities. It has become necessary and indeed urgent for museums to redefine their missions, their goals, their functions, and their strategies to reflect the expectations of a changing world. For cultural institutions like museums, getting involved in tourism and in developing cooperation with it presents major opportunities towards a sustainable path. It is therefore recommended that this museum management training for higher education institution and other stakeholders explore how museums and tourism can work together towards their common goals. This is an immense and actual task, but one whose fruits will become valuable to humanity and to this and the future generations. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Venus Tan, for the wonderful presentation. So we are now going to proceed with the question and answer. Hello, good morning, Ma'am Venus.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Ikin. Thank you for having me. A pleasant good morning to all the participants from all over the Philippines. Very happy to be here.
Thank you so much. So we gathered some questions from different institutions from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, and they have posted these questions coming from Visayas. The question is, can you give us an example on how higher education institutions can partner up with LGUs and tourism agencies in order to promote cultural tourism?
Yeah, well, I think that was clearly stated in my talk a while ago, that indeed there is also a mandate coming from the ILG that the LGU should work together in propagating culture and tourism. And this is the key. And to me, the museums provide the cultural aspects of a place. Pride of place is something that people look forward to, no? And anyone who comes to, for instance, to the Cordilleras, don't like to see a lot of shopping malls, for instance, but really want to immerse themselves in the cultural values of the destination and feel the heartbeat. So it is important that all of these are even preserved by the local government. They have to appreciate what they have, and because they have to preserve the identity primarily of the destination, which makes them really an important aspect for travel and tourism. Nowadays, tourism has really changed. People are not just staying in hotels. They really want experiential aspects. They really want to immerse themselves, to be educated, to know, and to really even live with culture. So it's very, very important that we look at this aspect. In the years and times of the pandemic, for instance, people don't want to be cooped up in 4 squares of rooms. They want open spaces. And where do you bring them? They want to be brought in nature. They want to learn about the culture, heritage of a place, and so on. And so I think this is an important role. And so travel agencies are starting to realize this, because we're not only dealing with the domestic tourism. What is important is that the international market really appreciates us. We're not just about beaches. We're not just about beautiful waterfalls. We're really about more than that. We are really more about culture. We have to bring that identity together. And that is quite important. And I think the relationship between LGUs, the museums, and the travel sector should really be enhanced.
Thank you, Ma'am Venus. In relation to that, there is a follow-up question from Western University. And with the pandemic right now, there is an effect on tourism. How are museums coping with the pandemic, and what is the effect of the current situation in relation to tourism to the museums now? So how are we, on your perspective, how are we going to cope with this situation?
That's a very valid question. And I think, to me, I've always said, the pandemic may not even leave us. So we have to learn to live with it. We have to constantly change paradigm. Earlier, the first thing that we've seen is a virtual tour of a museum. And I think more and more people will look at all of this. Technology is being enhanced to provide all of this. So both virtual, and I would say a certain degree of physical appreciation is also something that we need to balance. I think that the museum should continue to innovate in that sense. Technology is here to stay. And part of this, for instance, is what we're doing now. The webinars are slowly and being part and integrated in our lifestyle. It is now a lifestyle. So to me, let us not go against the grain, but go with the grain and go with the tide and start to innovate more. More and more virtual learnings, more and more virtual focus could be that. Before we start opening up, I think this is the time, before we start bouncing back, there's a time to step back. There's a time to step back. Start creating your product so that you can start to market it properly in the new normal.
Thank you, ma'am. That's well said. In relation to some questions here, we have participants coming from the tourism sector, and we have some tourist guide associations also who recently joined. They have a question on this one. Some LGU museums are under the tourism office. How does this sit together with the staff untrained in museology and vice versa? Why is tourism a requirement for museum work? No? So, two interrelated questions.
Mhm. I don't see the question being mixing tourism as and museums, right? But I see the relevance now because, as I said in my earlier talk, is that there is a relevance between tourism and who we are, and that's culture. And more, I think this will be what is relevant in the future. It is no longer what we see as touristic in a sense, where you bring them to the most beautiful places, most beautiful beaches. These are all, we're known for that already. But I think deeply now, it is important to look at soft power. And soft power is something that we should start looking at. And what is soft power? It's really what is inherent to us as a people. What defines us, essentially, is our culture, our heritage. It's not how romanticized we are as a beach destination, because everybody knows that we are an archipelago already. There's no sense in marketing that. But what is important now is how relevant we as a people contributing to the entire ecosystem of the world. What we are as a people is, to me, an important aspect of tourism content and narrative. What is the Philippines and the Filipino? That is important. And I think, true, that is why when I was regional director, I made it a point that one of the modules in tour guiding, in fact, is a day-long lecture on history, on culture, and heritage. To me, that is important for all of the tour guides to understand, because, you know, as in museums, you tell about story. Tourism is all about storytelling. So that, to me, is the perfect relationship.
Okay, thank you, Ma'am Venus. So we have a lot of questions coming in, and our staff is taking note of all of your questions. So here, this is another related question regarding to your premise earlier. What is the role of museums and tourism agencies in ensuring that cultural tourism brings empowerment and not exploitation to the locals, most especially the indigenous population?
Yeah. And so when I talk about RISE, responsible, that R is the most important thing. I think all of us should be responsible. We should always exert a cultural sensitivity wherever we go. Responsible, inclusive. And to me, that is encompasses the idea of really reaching out to everyone. Everyone should be in one page. Everybody should really look at how we as a people really exist. And that is the story of a museum, and that is the story why tourism exists. It is not a glamour industry, neither it is a vanity industry. It is an industry of a people. It is an industry that provides sustainable jobs for many people. And to me, that's part of the S also. Sustainability in tourism and even in museum. It's really preservation to make sure that our story is heard many, many years, even if we're not here anymore. And that's precisely why in one of my projects when I was regional director is that I said, you know, the rice terraces is slowly eroding. Why? Because people are no longer planting in the terraces. The terraces will only live if it's planted. You know, it is the rice that's planted there. And if people don't don't start planting again and living there and making sure that they appreciate it. Where is the sustainability there? Where is the tourism value chain there? It's gone. We don't have anymore. It's a UNESCO heritage site. And so we have to preserve that. And to me, the sustainability is really appreciating the destination and making sure that everybody in the community, the people living there, have livelihood, the histories, the culture is preserved, and heritage is preserved for the next millennia.
Thank you, ma'am. That is very interesting about the rise. No, there's a question about soft power. No, in relation to how this is a well, the comment here is soft power is really very interesting as you have discussed. But how do HEIs? This is a question from Mima Ropa somewhere. So how do we start the process of collaborating with communities, with LGUs and other tourism agencies to promote this community museums?
As I argued earlier on, I said hard selling the destination, especially the Philippines, it's no longer the case. We cannot anymore over promote or market the Philippines as a beach destination. That is, to me, no longer the issue here. I think we need to move on to a deeper sense of appreciation, even of who we are. The more we appreciate ourselves, we actually imbibe that kind of appreciation for tourists because they see that we are proud of who we are. And so that translates to a narrative of people to even appreciate us. And that becomes a tourism content. For instance, when I was a tourism COO, I was starting to look at other aspects of travel and tourism and products in the Philippines. For instance, we are an archipelago, right? And so what does that mean? We don't only have shores, beaches. We don't only have that. But remember, we have waterways, we have lakes, we have rivers. And in this product setting of rivers, you must remember that rivers started civilization. Up to this day, people, indigenous people live along riverbanks. What a beautiful story and soft power to sell the Philippines, going through rivers, stopping in communities and villages, and appreciating their basketry, their weaving along the rivers, and move again, look at the nature, bird watching, etc. To me, this is soft power. And this is no longer hard sell. This is no longer, it is out of the box. People are now looking at experiential travel and no longer ordinary travel. To me, that is soft power. Feeling the really.
Thank you, ma'am. So there's a lot of questions from the Pitan, Mindanao, and a lot more questions. So we have a question from Professor Boots Herrera from the Ateneo Art Gallery. She comments, I quote, I can't seem to misstand. Okay, this is about exhibition exchange with other museums in other countries. What can you say about the limited there's a limited form and restrictions by the government in terms of the policies and procedures to transport works of art? No? What can you say about this? Because we are trying to promote internationalization, promoting cultures overseas and others, but there seems to be a restriction on government policies and procedures, such as the Bureau of Customs and the Department of Finance. How do we deal with it?
I think that's very valid. And I'd like to make a point here. There is no need, actually, for artifacts even to be transported. As I have experienced, as I know, yourself, Director Ikin, you actually traveled to Germany, in fact, to catalog some of the artifacts of the Cordilleras in numerous museums in Germany, in Dresden, in Berlin, in Frankfurt, in Stuttgart, for instance. There are so many artifacts of the Cordilleras stored in all of these museums. But to us, let them be there, let them be stored there properly, preserved there properly. But what we can do is actually catalog them, which you've done. Catalog them and maybe turn them into beautiful books that we can bring back here, catalog them, do a virtual cataloging of all of this, and show it in films. I think this is an important idea, maybe that can be done. You don't really need to start bringing in the artifacts here. In the meantime, that the laws don't allow us. But what can stop us from really cooperating with all of these museums abroad to exchange, for instance, catalogs, exchange videos, catalog them, and make beautiful movies out of all of this. So to me, it can be done, and create a space where people can do lectures at the same time and show a beautiful film about all of this and create a story. To me, this is something that can be done.
Okay. Here's another question, Ma'am Venus, in relation to promoting Filipino culture in the in overseas. Okay, there's a question about what are the strategies of Department of Tourism to promote our museums to the foreign market? Is it necessary, or shall we focus on within, or in the Philippines primarily first before going overseas?
No, I've always been promoting when I was as a tourism attaché, and again as a COO of the Tourism Promotion Board. I made it a point that our culture is integrated with marketing, integrated with selling. In two of the biggest fairs in the world, one for instance in Berlin, this is the Olympics of Travel and Tourism, the International Bourse, Tourismus Bourse in Berlin. This is held every year. It's the biggest tourism fair. The Philippines has a 300 square meter pavilion. And what I do is bring in, for instance, our beautiful weaves. We animate the pavilion, for instance. So it's not just about B2B selling. People can see how we do weaving, how we do basketry, how we actually have products like coffee that we're very proud of, Benguet coffee, Togon coffee, what have you. We have baristas that blend this and create a story. So in the way we do this is really a holistic way of promoting the Philippines. We've done this also in London. For instance, I brought, for instance, a weaver coming from Kalinga. Her name is Irene. She makes beautiful tapestry. She's the toast of everyone. They were all really amazed at how intricate our weaves are, how beautiful our baskets are, and so on. And so I think, to me, this is how we marry. We don't only bring the museum, we actually bring living museums into the context, into the dynamism of how we are really promoting the Philippines.
Okay. So, ma'am, this is in relation to what you said earlier about living museums, no, bringing cultures to the museums, making it alive and all. So, we have a question from Dapitan, Mindanao, JRMSU from Vespers Sierras. His question is on the collection. Do we still need to get ethical certificates from authorities or agencies to ensure protection of IP and cultural resources? Because sometimes it is difficult to bring in all of these artifacts inside these so-called living museums. So how do we deal with it in terms of, from the government perspective?
To me, these are really procedurals, and I am not privy to how artifacts are really brought out. No, that's not my department's perspective. But what we do is bring films. What we do is bring examples. So I said earlier, we brought tapestries of weaves. We brought the people that actually weave this. We brought people actually from even Butuan, and so on, that actually weave indigenous uh, um, natural fibers and put them into beautiful jewelry. These are the things. But as far as really artifacts, museum pieces, I think this is something that the better authorities in museum and customs can do. But we've actually helped also promote some of the um, uh, cultural and historical uh, museum pieces before, like for instance, the San Diego. But this is, of course, in collaboration with the museum, the National Museum. They were the ones who brought this, not actually tourism. We facilitated in a way, but really not the technical aspects. I think there are regulations that we must follow, and we should really provide the guidelines for all of this. And in fact, one of the things that can arise from all of this is repatriation even. So repatriation of our artifacts that are still there and all that. But these are I would say a mutual agreement from the countries, and that to me is something that I'm not privy to.
Thank you, ma'am. So we have a lot of questions. It's 11:43, but probably we can extend until 12 and take in more questions from our participants. So there's a question from Rona Repancol from UST. How does one exercise responsibility in tourism so communities and heritage resources are not misappropriated?
Yeah, that's why I am a firm believer that appropriation should be really the norm for all of this. I think that we should acknowledge where it comes from. We should really be sensitive, culturally sensitive to all of these things. I'm a firm believer of that. And to me, I think that our tourism practitioners should do the same. I, I also believe that, as I said before, communication is really key. It is not the fault, for instance, of a normal tourist coming from Manila putting on a fabric that probably is used for burial. Why? Because simply it was never communicated, and that we never told them that this material is actually not being used for such. So I think to me the role of museums and tourism should really look at how we communicate travel, how we communicate cultural sensitivities to a lot of people. That is the key. I think messaging will be important in curatorial work, in tourism, the tourism industry as a whole, especially when it comes to travel agencies and tour operators. And I think that they must immerse themselves in this. And I think this is where we link up with the museums so that there is a clear understanding. There is also that synergy where we can sit down together, have a seminar like this together, and really work on what we should communicate and what are these cultural artifacts, what it means to people, why should we be sensitive to it, and to me is part of responsible tourism.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much. So, in relation to this responsible tourism, there is a question from Hobart Savior, and he's asking about the role of LGUs, which is very crucial in cultural tourism. Instead of featuring, well, you mentioned that earlier about leisure places like beaches and other places, no? He is asking if you could give an insight on, I lost the well, okay, here you go. If you can give an insight on how we can convince LGU leaders in promoting local tourism, because an issue there is on sustainability, because once they change their terms and people are changing guards with different leadership, thus there is problem in the prioritization and sustainability of tourism, and of course the building of museums, which should well, we know now that a town should have a museum of its own. So he's asking if you can give an insights on this, please.
Okay, first of all, again, I go back to the IFG, and they have been mandated actually, and that's part of the pillars of travel and tourism and culture is part of their pillars of being mandated by the ILG, and I think they should really seriously look into that. I think we look at development as a term, and I realize, and I know because I've dealt with LGUs also, and I've actually engaged them to really inform them that development does not mean building, does not mean urban, unmitigated urban development. It does not mean that. To me, development in a community, for instance, I can cite, for instance, like Kalinga. Okay, let's talk about Kalinga, or even parts of Mindanao, for instance. You have a thriving indigenous community that really are really there because of a purpose. We cannot, it is our responsibility as LGU or even tourism to preserve that identity rather than really put our brand of development. And to me, that should be something to be worked out between all sectors, tourism, the Department of Natural Resources. It is a multi-sectoral responsibility, and it's just not one sector. It is not just LGU, it's not just tourism, it's not just DA, for instance. It is multi-sectoral. And when I was regional director, I actually tried and created a system by which all the line agencies communicate with one another, create a program that we can all do together to make synergy and make an impact into communities. By doing so, you actually coordinate this with the LGU. You provide them the initiative actually so that they can cooperate with you. Again, it is communication. They might not know what you're doing, and you don't know what they're doing. And it is important that both the sectors know what everybody's doing so that you all work in one page. For instance, one time I said, the basic necessities of tourism is actually, when you travel, what is the basic needs for a traveler? You have clean toilet, right? You have clean toilets. You have a place where you can buy souvenirs, stuff like that. So all of this, actually, it is an LGU thing. The LGUs have to realize what the needs of travel and tourism is. And in like manner, they have to know the needs of a museum. So what can a museum do in this regard is that really we have to build a community together. We cannot do it alone. All the line agencies must work together. So in Kordilyera, in all the regions, it is all the same. Everybody must be working together for common good. But what is important is that communities all over the Philippines, we cannot be competing. That's important. Every community, every destination in the Philippines have a story to tell. Each of us have our own identity. Build on that identity. It is important to look at inventorying all of this, what identifies you. And that is where you should work on.
Thank you, Ma'am Venus. In relation to that, there's a comment from Loy Marcelo. Aside from LGUs and other government institutions, this is more of a comment. Maybe the Department of Education or the government can stipulate that local students should visit the local museums or learn about it before traveling outside. No? So that's his recommendation. And tourism courses should have a basic learning about museums too.
Absolutely. I lived abroad. I lived in Europe for 15 years. And you know, it is part of their lifestyle. A toddler, no, going to a nursery school. Once a week, you see their teachers and toddlers bringing them to museums. They start them young. And I think it's not too late. This should be part of the education starting from people when we are young. It has to start from there. Deaf Ed, for instance, must really put this into their learning system. Virtual, everything, you know, children, you start them young. That's important. And then you have a community as you grow old. Then the appreciation of museum will thrive. And to me, that's sustainable.
Thank you, ma'am. The topic of our training is transforming university museums as sites of cultural education and creativity tourism. There's a lot of questions coming from different institutions, HEIs, no? And there's a question about how do we position university museums in the tourism of the place?
Oh, very interesting. I can cite, for instance, the Museo Kordilyera. You know, it has become an iconic, I would say, destination when people come to Baguio now. In fact, ever since the designation of the city of Baguio as a creative city, it now becomes part of an environment, a beautiful environment where creativity really thrives. And an institution like the museums are really integral to all of this creativity because every now and then they showcase the art and creativity, the artistry of a people and the culture of a people. They create that atmosphere of content, of interest because there's a story to tell. So that's why I said the museum should really be part of a tourism narrative, and it starts from there. When I was TPB COO, when we had a lot of invitationals, both tour operators coming from all over the world and media coming from all over the world, I make it a point and tell the tour operators that part or even the beginning of a tour should start with a museum because that is the first place when they have a capsulized perspective of who the Philippines and what the Filipino is all about. I make sure that they really appreciate first and foremost what the country really is and what the people really are.
Thank you, Ma'am Venus. So we have so many questions coming in from our participants, and I guess the relationship between museum and tourism, as you mentioned earlier, is about this identity construction, which is very important for us Filipinos and those who are Filipinos in diaspora. Okay, I think that we can take more question from Alfayed Paraji from the Museo de la Universidad de Zamboanga. He is asking, how can we maintain the image of university museums in a particular locale? Since this is related to another question, since higher educational institutions are not really pushed to put their own museums for the community. So the question is, how do we maintain this? Like the case of Museo Kordilyera, for instance, it has a role in the creative city. How do we maintain or sustain this image of the university museum in a particular community?
Okay, I think it's not just about the museum per se. It's not just about being here structurally and creating different activities within the region. But you see, the university has its outreach program all over the region. For instance, you go to the provinces lecturing I would surmise, right, that you have research activities going on in the different areas where you can actually interact with the communities there, making sure that both of you provide the right imaging, right researches that comes out of there so that you can bring it to the museum. And to me, I think that's a vibrant relationship, in fact, with communities outside of the museum. And to me, I think the universities play a big role. And if you have a museum in your campus, that's actually very practical in a sense, because students come here. They don't only come from cities, but they do come from provinces where some of these artifacts even come from. So it's a mutually beneficial learning and enriching a way of really synergy amongst everyone. It's not only about people coming in to look at the museum, but actually it is actually working well with where all of this come from, and the university students that are in the university really appreciate also, because some of them, most of university students don't even come from, for instance, in the Cordilleras. They're everywhere from different regions that attend universities, for instance, like UP. And so I think this is a good way of appreciating intra-regional appreciation of culture and a cultural exchange.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. I'll take one last question. Can a museum practitioner be a tourist guide at the same time in relation to what have you mentioned earlier?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think you are the perfect tour guide because you know by heart and soul what exactly are all of this, part of the museum. As I said, tourism is all about storytelling. And it becomes really interesting for someone coming from from Manila, for instance, from different regions, to really immerse himself in the culture of a place. And to me, I think perfect. A tour guide coming from the museum is somebody who can also teach our tour guides that they're not even coming from museum. That's perfect.
Okay, ma'am. Since there's so many questions, I can take in one last from Jimbo Fatala from Marinduque. Ms. Tan mentioned that, I quote, museums should understand how tourism works, unquote, if they really want to become relevant. What is exactly about tourism management that museum oftentimes lack or could integrate within their operation? That's the
As we
last
said,
question.
okay. As we said, tourism is really a people-to-people contact. I come from, I worked abroad as a tourism attaché. I know the market, and then I became tourism director in the Cordilleras. And so I started to mix market and the destination and the product. To me, we need to understand, I needed to understand the product before I am able to market it. I know the market, therefore I need to match you with the destination. And so that's how I feel that the needs of the market, both international and local, needs to be understood also by the museum, what they need. And it is part of that dynamic where we can really cooperate. And to me, that's how we should really work together.
All right. We have so many questions coming in. We'll just take note to all of the questions, and we will respond to that via
You can
email.
send me an email if they need.
Yes. And some of the questions are actually related to the second series. That's tomorrow on the role of university museums on tourism industry. And with our Chancellor Raimundo Revillos. Now, some of the questions will be asked there tomorrow. And now we thank Ma'am Venus Tan for joining us for half day at the Museo Kordilyera. Do you have some last words, ma'am, for this talk?
Thank you very much, Director Ikin. It is my pleasure. I am honored to have been chosen as one of the speakers. I'd like to continue on also for those of the audience that have not had the opportunity also to air their questions. I'm available. You can also share my email. I'll be very happy to answer your question. Again, thank you very much to the University of the Philippines in Baguio. Thank you very much to Chad for this really wonderful webinar workshop. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, and we'll see you around. Thank you to our participants. We have a lot. It's now 580 participants coming over. And we have an online survey. This is a feedback form to issue a certificate of completion, which will be sent to the chat room, and you can complete that as soon as the webinar for today ends. Thank you so much and have a good day. The lecture will start again tomorrow at 10 o'clock sharp with two speakers back to back. That's by Dr. Raimundo Rovillos, Chancellor of UP Baguio, and Dr. Jobers Bersales. He's the head of the National Committee on Museums from NCCA and also the director of the University of San Carlos Museum in Cebu City. So tomorrow we will focus about university museums and their role to creative industries. Thank you so much, Ma'am Venus, and thank you to all our participants. See you tomorrow.